Here's the first one, lack of trust. You know you have a lack of trust in a relationship when there's no open discussion because of fear. No open discussion because of fear. You can't be open with one another. You can't have crucial conversations or critical conversations about things that need to be decided because fear of rejection, fear of how are they going to respond, fear of maybe they'll leave, fear of I wonder what their parents will say. There's all kinds of fears that we have, and so we shut down the possibility of open discussion because of fear. That's an indication of a lack of trust in a marriage or relationship. The second one is there's no vulnerability allowed. No vulnerability allowed. What's vulnerability allowed? Vulnerability is when I let out the real me that you don't freak out. I'm like, this is who I am, or this is what I've done, or this is what happened. And you don't go, I can't be with you in the same house. I can't be with you in the same room. You have to get out. You have to deal with that. I can't stand hearing you say that. That's a lack of vulnerability allowed. And that means there's a lack of trust in that relationship when that kind of reaction happens. If the other person can really be them, in a place, and the spouse or the other individual and the other guy goes, oh, okay, well, we'll deal with it. That means you have a seedbed of trust that has happened in that relationship rather than freaking out of saying, I can't be around you or I can't deal with this. There's no vulnerability. Now, having said vulnerability is needed in a relationship, also confidentiality brings trust. And lack of confidentiality will introduce mistrust. And so, in one sense, I'm saying vulnerability or being open is good, but I'm also saying confidentiality is good as well, and that brings trust. And if you don't have any, then you're going to have mistrust in your relationship. Here's the third one. I don't have trust in my marriage or relationship if there's a constant questioning of motives. A constant questioning of motives. How long will this last? Is this really real? Is this just behavior modification? Or has something changed in the individual's heart? Speaking of heart, next week, Dan is going to be preaching. He and I were talking on the phone yesterday. Wow, what a message he's going to bring about what happens in our heart, in our relationships, and what's needed in our heart. So that's coming up next week. But the constant questioning of motives is something that if you do that in your relationship, it's an indication of a lack of trust. I noticed one thing about trust is that people oftentimes use it as a blanket term, such as, I don't trust you. And that's really not an accurate thing to say, because in another way, trust has pockets that you don't trust and pockets that you do in a relationship. For instance, you might trust your spouse to drive well. You might trust your spouse to cook well. You might trust your spouse to, bring home a paycheck or get their grocery list. You might trust your spouse to mow the lawn weekly or go get the mail. You know, those are aspects that you trust the spouse, but you might not trust your spouse that when you to handle money, or you might not trust your spouse if you need to talk something through that they're not going to judge you. Or you might not trust your spouse that if you say something in confidence that they're going to go tell all your friends. And so sometimes we use I don't trust you as kind of this blanket overall, when in reality there's lots of times we do trust one another in certain areas and then we don't trust them in others.